What's up guys, my name's Brandon and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new iOS 26 features and changes. We're going to talk about a new roadblock for CarPlay Ultra, Apple's potential AI acquisition, new details on the AirTag 2, and much more. And as always, if you want to continue the conversation off of YouTube, be sure to check out the Apple Den Discord server, which is linked down in the description below. Okay, so this week was an eventful one just as we anticipated. So this week we did see the second developer beta for iOS 26, along with all the other beta 2 updates across the board. So beta 2, just overall, just right off the bat, has been so much better than beta 1 in almost every way. So we'll talk more about the performance and the battery life later on in this video, but I just need to say that from the jump that everything is better with beta 2. So I know we had a lot of complaints, a lot of issues with beta 1, but a lot of those have been solved with beta 2. Of course, a big one was the control center. As you can see now, it's a lot more blurred in the background. Doesn't really go with the liquid glass design now, so I'm sure they will continue to tweak this throughout the beta stages. That's what it's for. Apple takes our feedback and honestly these videos as well into consideration when tweaking and kind of finalizing all the small details with iOS 26. So expect that to continue to get tweaked, but as far as UI bugs and things like that, much better in beta 2. But it wasn't all just bug fixes and improvements. We did also see quite a few new changes in iOS 26 beta 2. If you missed my What's New video somehow, I will link that down in the description below. That dropped on Monday with a lot of new features in beta 2, but there are some additional ones that I want to discuss. And the first one is inside of the podcasts application. So if you go to the now playing screen of a podcast and you go to adjust the playback speed, so you can see mine is at 1.8x, we now have a new option that says save custom settings for this show. So now you can set custom playback speeds based on the specific show, the specific podcast that you're listening to, which is awesome. And after you set those custom settings, you also get an option right here to reset to default. So you can see my custom settings were 1.8x speed, and also I had enhanced dialogue enabled. But if I wanted to reset that back to default, I could just tap right there, reset to default. That is awesome. And something else in the podcast application that some people were surprised was a feature, even though I did cover it in my What's New video in beta 1, but you do not have to select one of these pre-selected playback speeds. So if you wanted to do 1.6x, you can do that. All you have to do is tap and hold right here and start to swipe over, and you can see you have this little slider right here where you can adjust the playback speed to whatever speed you would like. So now you can see 1.8x, it kind of just changes down there as you can see. So I can go to 1.6x, for example, if I want to really fine tune that playback speed. Now here's another new feature I just noticed in the home application. So if you trigger Siri to turn on one of your HomeKit devices or turn off a HomeKit device, you can see that you now have this really cool animation that comes from underneath of that notification tab right there, and it will give you suggestions. So now you have home suggestions based on what you just did. So if you turn your lights on or if you turn them off, you can see it will give you suggestions like what's the temperature in the office, since I just turned the lights on in the office. It will give you those different suggestions now, which is pretty neat. Now, one of the big new features in the Messages application with iOS 26 is the ability to set a background, a wallpaper for that conversation. But did you know that you can now also set a wallpaper, a background for RCS messages? It does not have to be iMessage. And how this works, it's not the same way. When you tap up here and you can see a section for backgrounds or wallpapers, you can see it does not show that, but there is a way to set the wallpaper, and that is if an image is sent or received. You can see right here, I can tap and hold on this, and if I go down, there's a new option to set as background. And now when you select that, you get this new interface here, just like you get with iMessage, and you can set the background for this RCS message. And you can see I set it there, and now that is the background. In the phone application on the recent calls list right here, if you swipe over from right to left, you can see that we now have a new option for reminders. So you can select that and you can get a callback reminder right here from the recents view. You can do 1 hour, tonight, tomorrow, or at a certain date. There were also a few new app icons with beta 2. So number one, the Files application looks a little bit different, a little bit better honestly than it did in beta 1. And same goes with the Invites application. It has a slightly new look here in beta 2. Also, the Apple Developer application has a slight revamp to the icon. And then the last one was for Test Flight. So Test Flight has a slightly altered app icon now. If we head into settings, general, and then into about, and we go down to the IMEI number, so before in beta 1, when you tapped and held on that, we had the option for barcode where you can pull up a barcode, so maybe an Apple Store or something can scan your IMEI number, but now we have a new option in beta 2 in addition to that says share device identifiers, and now when you tap on that, it will show all of your device identifiers, your EID, your IMEI, and your IMEI 2. So it will show all those as a number and also as the barcodes. And also, if you tap on use reader to scan, you can kind of hold this to basically airdrop that information to whoever needs it, whether it's a carrier, the Apple Store, whatever, you can do that. And it says the device identifiers for this iPhone will be shared if you hold it near the reader, aka another Apple device or anything with NFC. So super cool addition there. It's a small feature that most people won't need to use, but when you do, that will be nice to have. If you have multiple keyboards set up in the settings application and you go down to the globe icon and you have to press on that, this interface has been updated. So it looks a lot better than it did previously, and you can see the selections are the same, but this just has a slightly different interface, and it's also a lot more responsive now than it was in beta 1. There's a new music widget with beta 2, so now if you go to add widget, you can see that there is going to be a new widget all the way down here at the end. So we do have pins, so you do have a widget for pinned albums and playlists, but also we have live radio as well. So we now have these two new widgets here for the music application with iOS 26. And speaking of music, if you have a HomePod, we finally have a crossfade feature. So you can now crossfade your music on a HomePod for up to 12 seconds. And you can actually set this up inside of the home application and inside of settings. And then also in beta 2, you'll just notice that the liquid glass design has expanded to more areas. Like the spotlight search had more of like a frosted look in beta 1. It wasn't really fully liquid glass like it is now in beta 2. And same goes with timers. So if you go into the clock application and you set a timer right here and you go back, the live activity now has a slightly glassier look than it did in beta 1. And then one of the UI fixes that I didn't mention in my beta 2 what's new video is down here with the pagination dots for weather. So if you go down here, if you have multiple cities, you can like swipe over on those. They're now like better formatted. It doesn't stretch the whole screen anymore like it did in beta 1. Now, if you head into the wallet application and tap on the three dots up in the top right and then go into orders, we have order tracking now with iOS 26 beta 2. Now, keep in mind, I did cover this in my what's new video, but I wanted to expand on this feature a little bit. So first off, order tracking has been around for a while. You can see back in 2024, I had an order in here, but it was very specific. Like it basically had to be like using the shop application with Shopify as far as I know, and you also had to use Apple Pay. It was also extremely inconsistent on iOS 18, but now with iOS 26 beta 1, it got a little bit better, but with beta 2, it's been expanded. The functionality has been expanded because now your orders will show up here even if you do not use Apple Pay. So if you use like an Amex or a Citi card or something else to make a purchase, it will show up here even if you did not use Apple Pay. And the way it does that is it actually searches through your mail application to look for orders, like your Amazons, your Chipotles, like all those things will show up here as long as you get the email in your inbox. So it does use Apple Intelligence for this. So you will need an Apple Intelligence device for this to work, but you do not need to use Apple Pay anymore, which is awesome. And then also right here, if you tap on the three dots, you can now mark as complete or delete the order. So you can see it shows this Petco one is still shipped, but that's already arrived at my house. So sometimes it doesn't update. It's still not the greatest just yet because it is still a new feature. It's still beta also, but you can now tap on the three dots and mark it as complete if it's already been delivered. And now you can see it will show this month and it will show it as complete now. Now also this week, Apple did release new AirPods Pro 2 and AirPods 4 beta firmware updates. So we did get this new version 8A293C. So I did install this on my AirPods 4 and I haven't noticed anything different aside from the earlier iOS 26 update where we got all the new features. But if I find anything new, if you guys found anything new, let me know down below. Also this week, iPhone users got very annoyed at Apple for advertising on their lock screen because as you can see here, this week, Apple did put out basically an advertisement for the upcoming F1, the movie film. So this is their new movie, of course, and they are basically advertising $10 off if you get tickets at Fandango. So a lot of people were not very happy with Apple putting out that advertisement from the wallet application on their device. So if you got that, let me know what your overall first impressions were. Do you think it was not a big deal? Do you think it was intrusive? exclusive? Like, what are your thoughts about Apple advertising things like that from the Wallet app? We did also see a new update for the Apple Sports application, my favorite sports app on iOS. So we now have version 3.0. So if we go into the application, you will see that we have a slightly new layout. So up top now, it does show home. So we now have that home tab up there. And you can see that we now have men's tennis and women's tennis now on Apple Sports. And then also for MLB, if you follow MLB scores, we now have pitcher and batter matchups at the top of every scoreboard. So if we go into one of these games, you will now see that for MLB. And also the Apple Invites application received an update this week, version 1.3. So we now have new event backgrounds. So there's now new event backgrounds. So if we go into the Invites application, we create an event and we go down to the backgrounds, you'll notice that there are some new ones in here now for invites. So great application. It hasn't really seen mass adoption just yet, I don't believe, but I do think it is a great application. Now, if you are a baller and you have the Hermes Apple Watch, you might have had a big issue this week if you installed the second watchOS 26 beta, because apparently some users were getting their expensive Hermes watch completely bricked. It was getting crashed. And this was actually mentioned in the release notes. So Apple themselves said that Apple Watch Hermes crashes continuously if updated to watchOS 26 beta 2. It's advised that these users do not update to beta 2. So I guess it's not technically bricked, but it's essentially bricked because it just keeps restarting itself over and over again. It keeps crashing over and over again to the point where you can't even really use the watch. And this is just another example of why I always tell you guys to never install early betas on a main device, especially like a watch, something where you probably only have one watch. So it's always advisable to wait until the public beta, unless you're somebody who is willing to take that risk and you know what to do in case your device does crash and it does have big bugs like this. Like if you've done it before and you know what you're doing, that's fine, that's a different story. But for the majority of people, it's almost always advisable to just wait for public beta at the minimum. So if you are a Chase Sapphire Reserve card holder, I know it's a very popular card out there, there's a new Apple perk that comes with that card. So you now get complimentary annual subscriptions to Apple TV Plus and Apple Music. So the two best services, in my opinion, that I pay for annually, those are now included with that card, which is a great benefits. So a few months ago, we saw the new feature in Find My with AirTags, where you can now share the item location of an AirTag. So if you tap on that, you can see get help finding your lost AirTag by sharing its location with an airline or a trusted person. So it's basically going to give a link, and airlines will be able to track your AirTags as well, as long as you opt in. So a lot of airlines were already on board, but this week we did see JetBlue officially get on board with this new share item location feature. So they said this on their website. They said to share an item's location, customers can generate a share item location link in the Find My app. This link can be provided to JetBlue by scanning the QR code in the baggage claim area or by working with a crew member at the airport's baggage service office. JetBlue crew members will use the temporary link to help locate and retrieve bags found within JetBlue stations or other contracted facilities. And then speaking of AirTags, we also got some fresh details on the upcoming AirTag 2. So we thought the AirTag 2 was already going to be out by now because it was supposed to come out in mid-2025, but now we have a fresh update from 9to5Mac because they're saying that Apple has already set up compatibility with the second-gen AirTag on iOS 18.6. This was found in the beta code, and it says this means that AirTag 2 should not require iOS 26. However, according to reliable 9to5Mac sources, Apple is now aiming at a fall release, likely putting its announcement around the time of the iPhone event in September. So now it seems like we're not going to see the second-gen AirTag until September, unfortunately. But anyways, going back to iOS 26 here, let's talk about the performance and the battery life and also what to expect next from Apple. So let's talk about the performance first, because performance on Beta 2, yes, it's slightly better than Beta 1, but it's still not quite good. I wouldn't consider it good. It's still very mediocre at best. So I was pretty optimistic in my original What's New video. I thought the performance, it did feel great. I didn't think it did feel great when I first started using it, but after I've been using it on my main device for the past week, this whole week, I've noticed that the performance, is just marginally better than it was in beta 1. And I wish I had a different storyline to tell you guys this week, but honestly, performance for me has really not been that much better in terms of just overall raw performance. Now, bug fixes, UI enhancements, things like that, yes, big difference. Beta 2, so much better. I've also only had one respring, but in terms of overall raw performance, going in and out of applications, typing on the keyboard, typing in Safari, things like that, it feels very similar, honestly, to beta 1 to me. So performance, still not great whatsoever for me on any of my devices, including my test device here. Now, I did go ahead and run a fresh Geekbench, and we did score a 3505 on single core, 8780 on the multi-core. So even the scores are really not that much higher than what we saw on beta 1. And actually, you can see beta 1 even had a higher score down here on June 13th for that multi-core. So interesting results. And just again, like I said, also like before beta 2 came out, don't expect massive differences in performance going from beta 1 to beta 2. Typically, we see the biggest jump in performance and battery life when we get to the public beta, which is around beta 3, beta 4, is when we really start to see that needle tick up for performance and for battery life. Now, speaking of battery life, let's talk about that. So I'm currently at 66%. I'm not sure what I started this video with, but battery life, I will say, has been a good bit better here in beta 2. So performance is not much better at all, but I think battery life is a little bit more of an improvement than performance was. So it's still not great, don't get me wrong. Battery life is still not good. I wouldn't even say it's good. It's just very mediocre as well, but it was like terrible in beta 1. So at least it's a little bit, it's marginally better, but just marginally better than the performance was in beta 1 compared to beta 2. So anyway, yeah, battery life here, you can see on my device here, battery life, I use over 200% right here. So that's actually a record. That's even worse than what I did on beta 1. I was probably just using my device more, but still, battery life, as you can see, not great. Also, the heat coming from the device, it's not as bad as beta 1, so I did talk about this in my What's New video as well. I will say you can't fry an egg on the back anymore, but it still gets quite warm when performing basic everyday tasks, which can be pretty frustrating. So that's also what leads to the bad battery life. So again, don't expect great battery life on beta 2. Of course, your usage will vary. Of course, your experience will vary as well. But for me, on multiple devices, including my iPad, not great. But let's talk about when it might get great, because the next release is going to be iOS 26 Developer Beta 3, and we might see an improvement there. So I'm not expecting that next week. Next week is the week of 4th of July on Friday. So not that that would make a difference, but usually we're still going to be on a 2-week cycle right now. So I would not expect to see beta 3 of iOS 26 until the week of June 7th, most likely right there on Monday, June 7th, since Apple does like to stick to those Monday releases about right now. So for the past really year, they've done that. So anyways, yeah, so we would expect that then. And then as far as the public beta, I would not expect that until potentially the week after. So maybe the week of July 14th is when we'll see the public beta of iOS 26. Now, could it come out right after Developer Beta 3, like that same week? Of course, it's possible. It's Apple. It's really hard to predict, when they're going to release the public beta, but they did say July, so I am expecting it in July, and it's typically always after the release of Developer Beta 3, typically. So I would expect that. Like I said, if I had to guess, it'd probably be on July 14th. And then if you're still on iOS 18, we are most likely going to see iOS 18.6 Beta 2 within the next week or so, maybe even next week. We'll see iOS 18.6 Beta 2. Would not really expect anything from iOS 18.6 in general. It's going to be a pretty boring update. It will be great for stability and bug fixes and things like that, but don't expect any type of major changes with 18.6. And then as far as iOS 18.5.1, an update that we were supposed to get a while back, we really don't know at this point when that's coming. We've kind of really just not heard anything about that. The news has completely dropped off the planet over the past, really ever since 26 Beta 1 came out. So at this point, I really don't know if we're even going to get it at all. If we do, it's really hard to say when. It could be next week. It could be at the end of July. Who knows at this point? But of course, you guys know, I will let you know here on the channel when it does get released. Okay, so now let's move on to some more Apple news, because this week we saw a new roadblock for the upcoming CarPlay Ultra. And I say upcoming, but CarPlay Ultra is currently in the new Aston Martins, and it will be coming to older Aston Martins with a software update. So CarPlay Ultra is actually out there in the wild right now. It's not just vaporware that's been announced and never in anything. It's actually in Aston Martins right now, but it might not be coming to the vehicle that you own. And that's because this week we heard that Apple is facing resistance from automakers over CarPlay Ultra because these automakers are no longer planning support for CarPlay Ultra. So we have Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Volvo, Polestar, and Renault. So none of them are going to support CarPlay Ultra, despite Apple announcing them as partners initially. And the reason that some of these car makers are pulling back, including Mercedes and Audi, is because they feel like Apple is overstepping. At least that's what Renault said, and they reportedly told Apple not to try to invade their own system. So basically these automakers are concerned about losing control over their, infotainment, their built-in infotainment, and potential revenue streams. Because as you know, CarPlay Ultra does, take over the whole dash and everything like that. The tachometer, all that is customizable. Apple actually works with the automakers to design their own layout that they want. But the big problem I have with all this is that this is optional. This is fully optional software. Like, their default infotainment is still built into the system, and the user can opt to do that if they want to. CarPlay Ultra is completely optional. So I really do not understand this pushback. Like, obviously everybody knows that default infotainment is not going to be as good as CarPlay Ultra. Maybe I shouldn't say everybody, and maybe not every manufacturer, but you know what I mean. The majority of infotainment systems, the UI, the software is just egregiously bad. It's just so outdated looking, and CarPlay Ultra honestly just makes it look so much more modern and better, and it adds extra functionality on top of it as well. So I think it's a win, and all the studies continue to show that people support and want CarPlay in their cars. So it's not saying that these cars won't have CarPlay in general. This is just for CarPlay Ultra. So very interesting. Now, there are still some people on board with CarPlay Ultra. So we are hearing that Hyundai, which is, Kia and Genesis models, they're going to be committed to supporting CarPlay Ultra along with Porsche. So if you have a Porsche, you will be able to have CarPlay Ultra on your device, on your car. So what do you think about this roadblock, pun intended, by the way, about CarPlay Ultra, basically being blocked by some of these massive automakers like Mercedes and Audi? That's going to be two major losses for CarPlay Ultra and people not being able to experience the new CarPlay Ultra. So let me know your thoughts down below. Now, we also heard late last week after I recorded Apple Weekly, but we have to talk about Apple potentially buying Perplexity, because we heard that Apple is allegedly in early talks to purchase Perplexity AI. And I personally think that this would be a winning acquisition. Like, sure, you can say that Perplexity is just using OpenAI's technology and it's just kind of like a wrapper. It's more than a wrapper, but a lot of people think that it's just like a wrapper, and that's basically it. But I think it's a bit more than that. It is quite a bit better in my opinion. I really use it all the time on my iPhone. But if Apple did acquire Perplexity, that could help Apple build its own AI-powered search engine, which is a huge, thing that they've been working on. Apple's been working on this for a while, basically as a hedge against possibly losing the $20 billion a year Google search deal due to the antitrust scrutiny they've been facing recently. Now, the interesting thing here is that Perplexity is currently valued at $14 billion, meaning that this would be the biggest Apple acquisition ever, like by a mile. You can see the last one here was $3 billion for Beats. So this would be a massive, deal for Apple. So that's interesting also because Meta did try to buy Perplexity earlier this year. They failed on that. They did not buy them, but they did purchase 49% of Scale AI. So clearly Apple and Meta and basically everybody at this point is just fighting to get the best AI talent. And that's ultimately why I think this would be a great decision for Apple to acquire a company like Perplexity, is mainly because the tech, yes, the tech is great, but I think mainly it's for the talent that would come along with the acquisition that can really help Apple at this stage build out that AI search engine and whatever is next for Apple, like the LLM, Siri, or whatever. And again, this is still in its early talks, so this is by no means saying that this deal is actually going to happen. Nobody knows at this point if or when it's going to happen. This is just what's been going around the rumor mill this past week. So what do you think about this? Do you think Apple should buy a company like Perplexity? Like, obviously, I think Apple should buy like Anthropic. Like, I think that's way out of budget for them. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But if Apple bought Anthropic, I think that would be a huge deal. But again, probably way out of budget for Apple, but Perplexity is a good alternative, I think. But what do you think about this? Let me know in the comment down below. Now, we did also hear about the upcoming M5 iPad Pro. This is really quietly approaching because we're now hearing that the OLED displays for the iPad Pro have just entered mass production this week in preparation of an October launch. And this comes from DigiTimes and also some more news about this is that, for the M4 iPad Pro last year, Samsung supplied the 11-inch panels and LG supplied the 13-inch panels. But this year, both manufacturers are going to supply panels for both sizes. And also, according to Instant Digital on Weibo, the next-gen iPad Pro models could have even thinner bezels around the screen. So, of course, last year was the massive iPad Pro redesign with the thinness and the lightweight and everything like that. But we're now hearing that the bezels around the screen might be even thinner. So that thing is going to be amazing looking. But aside from that, we're not really hearing about many changes as expected the next year after a refresh. Not a refresh, a redesign. So this upcoming one is going to be a refresh. Last time with M4, that was a redesign. But anyways, guys, that's it for this week. No crazy AirTag story. Since we did talk about AirTags earlier, I will have a crazy AirTag story for you guys next week. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on iOS 26 and anything else in this video down in the comments below. And of course, make sure you join the Discord server if you're not in there. I'm in there pretty much every single day. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.